Even without being an object, it can be the substratum of adhyasa. In the adhyasa of silver or nacre, what is necessary for adhyasa is that the nacre should be recognized as this. If there is no such cognition, there can be no adhyasa. Nacre is not self-luminous, and so it can be cognized only by a mental modification, vritti. The self is self-luminous, and so it does not need another cognition to become known. The word aparokshatvat in the bhashya means that the self is directly perceived and is self-revealing. An object is first seen through the visual organ that gives the knowledge in the form, there is this object. Then the person says, I see this object. It is only because the self shines in every cognition that a person is able to say that he sees the object. This proves that the self shines by itself. Moreover, from the fact that ignorance is known, it is clear that the self is self-luminous. Everyone knows what he does not know. So everyone experiences his ignorance. This also proves that the self is self-luminous. The Prabhakara school of Purvamimamsa does not accept the self to be self-luminous. According to it, knowledge is self-luminous. In any cognition, the self, who is the knower, the object known, and the knowledge are simultaneously revealed. They say that ignorance is not self-revealing. So, since ignorance is also known, they have necessarily to admit that the self is self-luminous. Now, a question is raised by the opponent. What is meant by saying that the self is self-luminous? Does it mean that the self illumines itself and others, or does it mean something else? The Buddhists say that knowledge becomes an object for the same knowledge. In knowledge of part, both knowledge and part are objects, Vishaya. Objects are revealed by light and light itself is revealed by the same light. And this is not accepted by Advaita. The Vishaya are object of knowledge and the Vishayi, the knower, can never be the same. Self-luminous means that it does not need any other consciousness to reveal it, but it is not correct to say that it illumines itself also. The self is always the knower and never the object. Earlier, when it was said that the self is not absolutely a non-object, avishaya, what was meant was that it could have objectiveness attributed to it, aropita vishayatva, and not that it could be an object in the true sense. The conclusion is that the self is necessarily self-luminous and it need not be an object for there to be adhyasa. Adhyasa of the non-self on the self is therefore possible. The opponent raises another objection. Adhyasa can take place only if the thing on which there is superimposition is in front of the person who experiences the illusion. Superimposition can occur only on an object which is in front. The self is the person himself and so it cannot be in front of him. There can therefore be no adhyasa on the self. The answer is there is no invariable rule that adhyasa can occur only on an object in front. Akasha, ether, is not perceptible by the sense organs. Still, blueness is superimposed on it. The Tarkika says that Akasha is the abode of sound and so it is known only by inference. It is therefore not perceptible as an object in front even according to the Tarkikas. In spite of this, It is a well-known fact that blueness is superimposed on Akasha. Similarly, Adhyasa is possible on the self, though it cannot be perceived as an object in front. By the use of the word api after apratyaksha in the bhashya, the Acharya indicates that the view that Akasha is apratyaksha is not accepted by Advaita. According to Advaita, Akasha is known directly by the witness consciousness itself. The Bhattas hold that Akasha can be seen by the eye. This is rejected by Advaita on the ground that if Akasha, which has no form or color, can be seen by the eye, it should also be possible to know it by the sense of touch, even though it does not have the quality of touch. An objection is raised that since one has to open the eyes to see Akasha, it is perceivable by the eyes. The answer to this is that one has to open the eyes to see the blue color and not to see Akasha. We can see with the eyes only things which are limited in size and not what are unlimited, like Akasha and the form of Ishvara. What we see with the eyes is not Akasha but Avakasha or empty space. If a thing can be seen by the eye, its absence should also be seen by the eye. The rule is that the absence of a thing is known by the same sense organ by which its presence is known. So, if we say that there is no avakasha or empty space, it means that its absence is seen by the eye. So, a person has to open his eyes only to see that no object with form is there and not to see empty space. Avakasha or empty space is different from Akasha either. An empty space disappears when an object is put there, but Akasha remains unaffected. To know that a quality is or is not there, we have to know its abode. For example, to know smell, we have to know its abode, such as a flower. So when we say that there is no sound in a particular place, we have to say that there is no sound in this particular part of Akasha. It is not necessary that the abode should be known by the same organ by which its quality is known. Smell is known by the olfactory organ, but the flower is known by the eye. We know sound by the ear, but its abode, Akasha, need not be known by the ear. It is known by the witness consciousness. All the objections raised against the possibility of superimposition of the not self on the self have been refuted in the preceding lectures, and superimposition has been established. Superimposition of the not self on the self is cause of such notions as I am a man, I am a doer and an enjoyer, etc. The Acharya says in the Bhashya that the adhyasa of this nature is called avidya by the learned, and the determination of the nature of the reality by discrimination is called vidya. Tamevam lakshanamадhyasam pandita avidyeti manyante tat vivekinam cha vastu swarupavadharanam vidyamahuhu. It is only the superimposition of the not self on the self that is called avidya, and not other superimpositions such as that of silver on nacre or snake on rope. It is only for getting rid of this avidya that Shastra has to be studied. In the Yoga Sutra, avidya is defined as looking upon the not self as the self. So by the term learned people, those who are learned in the Yoga Shastra are meant. This sentence should not be taken as referring to Moola Avidya or as saying that there is no difference between Avidya and Adhyasa. It only means that yogis refer to what we call Adhyasa as Avidya. It is called Avidya because it is destroyed by Vidya. According to Avidya, Adhyasa can be called Avidya because Avidya is the material cause of Adhyasa, just as the pot made of clay can be called clay. Eradicating this Avidya is the main purpose of the Shastras. The word Prahanaya is used to show that Adhyasa should be destroyed along with its cause. Moola Avidya does not by itself do any harm. It is Adhyasa that is the cause of all evil. It can be got rid of only by knowing the real self. The wrong identification will be removed only when the substratum, the pure self, is realized. It is only the knowledge arising from the Mahavakyas that is called Vidya. All other knowledge falls under the category of Avidya. The pure self is not at all affected by Avidya. It is not affected by the merits or defects of what is superimposed on it by Avidya. The mutual superimposition of the self and the not self is the basis for all activities in the world. Without this superimposition, there can be no activity. All the scriptures operate only with the superimposition as the basis. Not only the Karma Kanda, but even the Jnana Kanda or Vedanta is meant only for persons with this Adhyasa. This Adhyasa is necessary for all the 6 valid means of knowledge: perception, inference, comparison, verbal testimony, presumption, and non-apprehension. A doubt arises. Superimposition is wrong knowledge, Bhranti. If that is the basis for the valid means of knowledge, Pramana, how can they be accepted as valid? Even if such wrong knowledge is the basis for the worldly means of knowledge, how can the Shastra have superimposition as its basis? The object of the Shastra is to remove superimposition. So it is contradictory to say that Shastra itself operates only because of superimposition. The answer to this is, in the world, a person undertakes any action only when the desire to acquire or get rid of something arises in him. Such a desire arises only after he has got knowledge of the favorable or unfavorable nature of that thing. So, a person has first to become a knower or a pramata. Such a knower prompts his body to act in order to fulfill his desire.